So I'm going to show you some basic shapes. It's pretty straightforward. These are all the shapes. Now, you'll notice that in the bottom right, there's a little triangle. Anything in the toolbar that has a little triangle means there's more to it. Let's start with the rectangle tool. And what you can do is, when you hold down your mouse, you'll see them all. If you're going to be working on shapes a lot, do you see this little thing right here at the far right? You can use that to bring the whole thing out almost like a panel. It's really helpful if you're going to be drawing with a lot of shapes. You don't want to keep going back and forth, changing shapes. You can just use this. So let's go through these real quick. The square or the rectangle, if you start drawing by just dragging it, you could make anything from a skinny line to a big box to a rectangle to this just by dragging. If you hold the shift key, when you draw it, it's called a modifier key. It will make it a perfect square, the shift key. If you don't, if I let go of it, you can do whatever you want. One more thing you need to know when you're drawing this and most of the other shapes is if you hold Option, like notice that it draws from the left corner down or from the left corner up, over, right? It draws from the pivotal point of wherever my cursor hit first. But let's say, and often this is the case, you know where you want it to be. If you hit the Option key, it will draw from center. Really important. Option key to draw shapes from the center. So I'm going to hold Option. Now I'm from the center, but I'm all over the place. Now if I hold Shift at the same time, I'm drawing a square from the center. That same thing works for obviously the rounded rectangle, but the ellipse tool, same thing. If I hold the center, I'm drawing from the center. I much prefer to draw from the center because I know where I want the shape to land, not where I want it to start. Then when if I don't hold Shift, I can draw all these ellipses, right? Any strange shape I want. If I hold the Shift key at the same time, I'm drawing from the center a perfectly even proportioned circle. Now, if I let go of the Option key, I'm back to drawing from where my cursor first hit. So those are the two important modifier keys that are worth knowing. Option to draw from the center, Shift to keep it in proportion. Now, once you've made your shape, so the default is that it's going to fill it with white and outline it with black. That's default. You don't do anything. Now remember, we have this awesome properties panel, right? So I've made this circle, and without even opening any panels, I can just kind of play around with it. I can fill it with this lovely orange. I can put a stroke on it of green, and I can make it a thick stroke. I can even change the opacity, so it's a little bit tinted. Looks like a watermelon, right? And then remember, if I want to duplicate this, what would I do? Easiest way to duplicate it. The shortcut is to hold the Shift key, hold the Option key. Shift will keep it in line, so it'll duplicate it exactly in the same spot on the next page. And because I've adjusted the opacity, you can see through. And I don't want you to worry about that stuff as much as I just want you to worry about these creative shapes. So that's our square. Now let's get to the polygon tool. Polygon tool's fun. So I'm drawing the polygon tool. I want to draw it from the center, so I'm going to hold Option. But I don't want all these sides. I only want a few sides. What you've got to do is you've got to do the up and down arrows on your keyboard will affect how many sides it has, all the way to 3. I can make a perfect triangle with the polygon tool just by minusing the number of sides. Now, if you're thinking, I can't do those at the same time, that's actually not a problem because there's this awesome little tool right here. You see this right here? You can actually slide that. Now let me put this in screen. You can actually, so you see that there's an anchor for every corner, and then there's an anchor halfway between the corners, right? But there's this little one here is extra. And that's the one that allows you to adjust how many sides. So I made this and then I realized actually I want it to be a triangle. Isn't that awesome? Or you can come down here and make it all kinds of sides. Super helpful if you don't want to have to hold the Option to draw it from the center, and then the Shift to keep it proportionate, and then the up, down. I mean, how many fingers do we have, right? Now it gets even more fun. So remember that the polygon, you can change the number of sides. The star tool is where it gets pretty wild. Okay, so the default star tool is this. Now if I take the star tool, it's the same thing in that you can change the number of star tips by going up. Only this doesn't have the widget. So if you want to create another one, you just have to create another shape. The other thing you can do, so that one I dragged. So what this is a star with this many points, and it's filled with red, and it's got a 23-point green stroke, which is why it looks so strange. Let's bring it like that. There we go. That's probably better to look at. Otherwise, you're wondering how I got that. Okay, so no stroke. So that's a star with a bunch of tips, right? And I got it just by going up and down on the arrow key on my keyboard. You can also, if you know what you want, you could just take, we're gonna click right here. So the inner radius is 100 pixels. Outer radius is 200 pixels. There we go. The other thing you can do that I didn't show you, with your selection tool, if you want to rotate any of these shapes, so this state is slightly off center and you're thinking, oh shoot, I made it tilted to the left. If you just hover in the corner, you'll see that little arrow pointing and you can rotate it. Now, when I talk about inner radius and outer radius, I want to show you what I'm talking about. So this is the inner radius here, and I'm just going to put a stroke on this and no fill. That's basically the inner radius, and that's the outer radius, okay? So notice this star on the left, this is the inner radius, and this is the outer radius. So keeping that in mind, I'll show you how you can affect that. Let's just drag this off the artboard. Now I'm gonna take a star, I'm gonna hold Option, so draw. I think stars always draw from the center, so you don't have to hold up. So right now, the radius is that ratio of 2 to 1. But let's say I want the inner radius to be really small. I'll hit Command right now, and that locks the inner radius right there. That means as I drag now, it's all this outer radius. Does that make sense? So I locked the inner radius right here, and so now it's just the points. So then what happens is that it's only happening while it's live. So once I put it here like this, I can't change it. I have to make another one. It's unfortunate it doesn't have like a little dial or something, right? That'd be pretty cool. Not with the star. And then that star is it's gonna draw that next, which it thinks it's helping you with that. And the way that you can reset it is that you just click here and you do an outer radius of 200 pixels, an inner radius of 100 pixels with 5 stars. Now it's a standard star again. So let's say that we want now a big inner radius. So I'm gonna set the inner radius right here. Right here. Oops. And you don't want to let go. It can only happen while you're dragging it. So I'm going to set the inner radius right here, and then I can make it a little skinnier, or by setting the inner radius, you can also have really small points. The points are going to be created from about right here on. So they can be really small, and then I can make a bunch of them if you wanted to make that radius. You see that no matter what I do, that's the inner radius. It's locked there. Because I'm still holding the command key though. You can't let go. Everything with the star happens while it's live. And then I can, while it's live, I'm still holding everything. I can go down and eliminate some of these points. And then like I said, if you want to control that and you know what you want, you can just click. You can say, I want the outer radius to be 3 inches and the inner radius to be 1 inch, and I want 8. That's the star you get. This is the flare tool, pretty much useless. I've never used it. No one ever uses it. But if you want to play around with it, you can. And then just real quick, the line tool. And again, I'm going to open it up and drag it out with this. And I'm done with these. So the line tool works the same way. If you want to draw from the center, you hold the Option key. If you want to constrain it to 45 degrees, you hold the Shift key. So as you start to go out here, you hold Shift. As you start to come around, you hold Shift, it'll snap it. As I get to halfway, it'll snap it there. So it snaps it to the 45-degree angle you're closest to. So if I'm close, it'll snap it there. If I'm close to here, it'll snap it there. Closer to the center, it snaps it straight up. There is no fill on a line tool, only stroke. So if you wanted to make a thick stroke, for example, thick yellow stroke, right? Now what if you wanted to make a thick stroke like that, but you wanted the center to be red? You do the rectangle tool. Rectangle tool would be way easier because you can control the inside and the outside. So I could make this exact same thing, but I can control the inside. So I'll have the fill be red, and I'll have the stroke small enough that it lets the red show. So that's really the only difference. I mean, it's if you want to be able to control the fill and the stroke, you got to use the rectangle tool. The line tool is for just making straight lines. If you want to control some of this, you can click on the stroke. Right now this has a corner. You can make this a round cap like that. So again, you see how this, it's like a link. Click on stroke. I can make it a round cap, an end cap, a square cap. I can make control my corners. I can make it a dashed line, and then I can get into that sort of thing. 3, 1, 3, 1. And you only actually need to put in 2 unless they change, the dash and the gap. So that's still kind of heavy stroke to show that. And there it is. If it's too heavy a stroke, it'll fill it in. So now that it's a thin stroke, you can see the dash. So the line tool could be also rotated if you hover in the corner. You can move that around. You can duplicate it again by using the selection tool and holding the option, or just hitting V. But then it'll duplicate it wherever the last one duplicated there. Then we have a spiral, and the spiral is kind of like the star. So it draws from the center, and you can, with the plus tool, you make more spirals. See how it's getting more and more intricate? With the minus tool, you make less spirals. And you can also lock the center, just like on the star. The rectangle grid tool, if you were to make a building or something, you could use this. But you know what I find this useful for is grids. So I can use the rectangle grid tool. I can go to View, Guides, Make Guides. And then that becomes a guide for anything else I want to do. Like, let's say I want to make some shapes. I can make one shape in that one, fill it with red, with no stroke. And then I can make another one here. So it makes a really useful guide. Or you can use it, if you didn't use it as a guide, you could put strokes and fills on that too. The polar grid tool is the same thing. So you draw it like this. If you hold the shift key, it makes a perfect circle. If you hold the option key, it draws from the center. Left to right give you the dividers, and up and down give you the rings. This is another one that I find really useful as a guide. If we get rid of this, we use this here. I'm going to hold option, shift, and then I can go to view, guides, make guides. Meaning that it won't show. I can just use it as a guide for making other things. So if I wanted to make something that kind of shot out from the center, and this is the pen tool, which we haven't done yet, but you could use the center as your guide. So you could say, I want everything to start from that center and go out, go from here, here. Really helpful. Make it on it as a guide. I want you to just go to, when you have it selected, so you have this like this, go to View, Guides, Make Guides. Really great for, I mean, you can use any of them. You can use the line tool as a guide. You can use anything as a guide. But I find that this one and the grid tool are really good as guides when you want to place things along. What I want you to do now is I want you to create an illustration just from shapes and lines. Keep it simple. So you can duplicate things, you can twist them, rotate them, you can make stars in the sky, you can do whatever you want. Some of you are more advanced and some of you are more basic. So I'm not grading this on what kind of job you do with it. I just want you to spend some time playing. That's how you're going to learn this. So if you already know Illustrator a little bit, I want to see a pretty cool drawing with these shapes. It can be abstract, but maybe you're making a city, or maybe you're making, if you look on the canvas, you can kind of see what I grabbed for you. So something like this, if you're more advanced, you can go in and make all these shapes and distort them slightly. More basic, you can just make a confetti thing exploding with little tiny squares and triangles and lines, and it doesn't have to make sense at all. Stars, play around with that.